What would you like the power to do? Bank of America.
How's everybody doing today? I really wanted to photobomb that picture over there, but I got to give this speech. So, welcome everybody. We are thrilled to have you here at Hudson's Detroit, and I want to thank Sandy and everybody at the Chamber team for allowing us to build this partnership. We are looking forward to the Detroit Policy Conference being here at Hudson's for the next decade, as long as they will have us. So, this is a policy conference, and I thought today we would talk about policy. I'm going to talk about policy, and I'm going to talk about tax reform in the city of Detroit. But something happened, and I want to spend five minutes or so talking about something else. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about tax policy here in the city is so that I'm not just a broken record, always talking about the Renaissance Center and the riverfront. But then again, something happened, and I do want to spend a few minutes on it. So what happened? What happened? I was at a Michigan Chamber Board of Directors meeting earlier this week, and I do want to make clear that the Detroit Chamber is my first love, don't get me wrong, but I'm still young. I like to see other chambers, and I'm a member of that chamber as well. So the Michigan Chamber had a whole panel with folks from Michigan Future Inc. talking about this, that Michigan used to be a top 10 state in terms of personal income. And based on the most recent rankings, Michigan is 40th in the nation in personal income. And for those of you who are not, so into math and whatnot, income is good and declining income is bad, okay? 40th in the nation from being in the top 10. And the good folks at Michigan Future Inc. who were given that presentation were explaining why that is. And one of the fundamental reasons why is because we do not attract the young talent that is the engine of economic growth. That business follows talent, that high-wage, high-tech business in a modern economy follows talent, and if you don't have talent, you don't get the kind of growth that lifts wages across the state. And then we started to unpack why we don't attract top-tier talent. And there's a lot of reasons, and there's no silver bullets in this world, but a fundamental reason, and it's a very simple proposition, you want to attract young talent, offer what they want. Offer what they want. And so we gave the example of Austin. Austin is a juggernaut, Austin, Texas. 20 years ago, Austin was nothing. Now it's one of the fastest growing metros in the country. And why? Place is a huge part of that story, okay? Bars, restaurants, live music, entertainment. People wanted to be there. Talent started going there. Business followed. Virtuous cycle. Nashville, okay? Nashville ain't no Silicon Valley, okay? They specialize, if anything, in a different kind of silicon over there, all right? Finally got a laugh. Excellent. Took 3 failed jokes, but we got one. Got one, all right. Batting .333, I'll take it. Nashville was somewhere, however, that became a place that young people wanted to go to. For bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, man, this is cool. Live music, vibrant place. Young people started to make it a destination. Business followed. Nashville, tech hub, business hub, okay? Denver, same story. Place matters. Place matters. Now let's come home to here in Michigan. What are the bright spots of our growth? I have enormous respect for the leaders of Grand Rapids, the elected leaders, the civic leaders, because Grand Rapids is an engine for growth. Why? Because it's a cool city. People want to be there. Grand Rapids is beating Chicago in the net migration battle. And what have the civic leaders of Grand Rapids done? They've doubled down on that. Their entire riverfront is being transformed. A new amphitheater, soccer stadium, new housing, trails, bars, restaurants, hotels. It's going to be a magnet for talent for the next generation. And how are they doing that? It was an old, empty industrial riverfront. The way that they are doing it in Grand Rapids is through the Transformational Brownfield program. And so, while I didn't want to spend too much time talking about it, it made me realize that what we are talking about here in Detroit for our riverfront, for the Renaissance Center and the 40 acres of empty riverfront that we have here. Yes, we talk about it in its own context of how incredible will it be if that is the best waterfront destination in the country, full, thriving, an engine for attraction, an engine for talent. But it made me realize this week that it's so much bigger than that. Because if Michigan is going to thrive, those are the kind of places we need to build. Those are the kind of destinations that we need to build. And it's not just in Detroit. Other folks who are working with us to see the state continue to invest and partner in city building. Our friends in Macomb County, Mark Hackle was up here. Macomb with everybody. Damn right, Macomb with everybody. Because they have the abandoned and shuttered Lakeside Mall, 40-acre swath in the middle of Sterling Heights. Imagine if instead of that being an empty parking lot, it is a thriving town center with thousands of new housing units, hotels, shopping, retail, thriving town center. Place matters. Place is how we attract talent. Attracting talent is how we attract business. Attracting the businesses of the future is how we go from being a bottom 10 state in terms of our wealth and prosperity back to being a top 10 state. And to do that, for us, Grand Rapids, Macomb, Holland, Novi, everybody who's in this coalition together, Traverse City, we need partnership from the state. And at the end of the day, it's not just about these individual projects. It's about, do we want to be at the bottom or do we want to move back towards the top? But that was more of like, a sponsor's message you get at the beginning of a podcast. I really do want to talk about tax reform today. Why? Why am I taking this opportunity to talk about tax reform? For one thing, it's a policy conference. Let's talk policy, okay? Number two, we have a real political moment here. We're lowering property taxes in the city of Detroit and hopefully creating a structure where we can lower property taxes more broadly is a top priority for our new mayor, Mary Sheffield. It's a top priority for our city council, and it's a top priority for our leaders in Lansing, including the Speaker of the House, the affordability agenda, right? My goal today is to throw out some conversation starters. I don't know if these are the absolute right ideas. I certainly don't think they're the be-all and the end-all. The point is to throw out conversation starters and keep this critical conversation going. So, what's the problem that we're trying to solve here? At 82.2 mills, Detroit has the highest property tax rate among major cities in the country, okay? The effective property tax rate in Detroit is 2.25 times what it is in major cities, okay? So we talked earlier about being on, the top of lists, This is not the list that you want to be at the top of, okay? I do want to dispel the notion that it's a spending problem, okay? Just cut the budget, you're spending too much. Number one, of the 82 mills levied in the city of Detroit, Detroit actually only levies 24 of them, okay? The rest of them are for other taxing jurisdictions, schools, higher education, county services, regional parks, okay? You can't just say, Detroit, you have a massive property tax problem, cut your budget. Detroit is only not even a third of the total levy that the citizens of this community pay. And then just to put it in comparison, well, are we overspending relative to our peer cities? No. There's been a ton of research on this. Almost to the dollar, Detroit's budget is equal to peer cities like Cleveland, for example. We do not have a spending problem in the city of Detroit, which probably makes sense because we were bankrupt, a few years ago. You tend not to, be flush with cash and overspending when you are coming through bankruptcy. We don't have a spending problem. We have a structural tax problem. Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Real talk, it's a fundamental barrier to growth and development. Fundamental barrier to growth and development. Yes, it's also a burden on the residents that live here, on the senior citizen who has an extremely high tax bill. But it's also a fundamental barrier to growth and development. Think about it. Some taxes, are not really distorting of behavior. You buy a latte for, $6 and you pay a little bit of sales tax. You don't think about it, okay? But you're making the decision about where you're going to live, buy a home, what do? You look right at how much do I have to pay every month, okay? And in Detroit, it's a really, really big number. It's a fundamental barrier to new people moving into this city, okay? Development, we do development, okay? Development in some ways is not that complicated. At the end of the day, you want to build a project. The money that that project can generate, it's got to be more than the cost of building it, okay? That's the bottom line. That's why they made me CEO, because it's not very complicated, okay? But if 82 mills have to go to taxes, there's not a lot of cash flow left to pay your debt and actually have a viable investment. It's a fundamental barrier to population growth and to development. So what happens here in the city of Detroit? Because property taxes mean you can't develop, almost every project gets a tax abatement, okay? Because it's either that or nothing. And so what happens? You're not really generating property taxes for the city. Yes, you generate other forms of taxes, but it's a systemic problem. If your taxes are so high that everybody has to get an abatement, what are you? What are we doing? The analogy I use is like it's being stuck in quicksand. We are stuck in quicksand as a result of our policy. Our tax rate inhibits revenue growth, and because of that, we actually have to have a very high tax rate under our current structure because we have a narrow base, right? That's why it matters. It's a fundamental barrier to growth and development. So, what's the argument that I'm making here today? I want to make two fundamental arguments. I think the reason that we have been unsuccessful in fixing this structural problem for decades is because we've looked for a silver bullet. One solution that's going to enable us to lower our property taxes, okay? And what happens if you think of, a camel with straw in its back, we got to put so much straw on that camel's back, if the silver bullet to lower property taxes, I don't know what happens to the camel with all the straw in its back, but I think something bad happens, right? I don't think it's running around, okay? We can't look for a silver bullet. And the second thing that we, as a guiding principle, is whenever we've approached this in the past, we've said we got to reduce our property taxes by 30%, 40%, 25%, whatever it is. We start with that number, and then we kind of shoehorn policy into that, okay? And what happens is you find policy can't do all that work, okay? No silver bullet. So what I'm saying here today is lead with policy. Let's find independently smart public policies, more efficient ways to raise revenue, things that are less distorting, that are the right answer. Let's focus on that, and let's get where we get. And the honest answer is we're going to get real progress. And then you get out of a vicious cycle and you get into a virtuous cycle. Because you start to make real progress, then you get growth, and growth is the ultimate answer. So, there's three things that I want to talk about today for how we do this, okay? And I see I have 17 minutes left, so I'm going to start talking more slowly, okay? All right, the first thing is land value tax. You guys might be familiar with this. It was a major push from the city in 2023. And it's good public policy, okay? The land value tax says we have a lot of people who came into Detroit, and Mayor Duggan, what do we call him now? Mike, they speculated and bought up land almost as lottery tickets, okay? Maybe Stellantis will come and build a new factory here. I own all this vacant land. I've been sitting on it for decades. They got to buy me out, so I'm a speculator, okay? We have tons of land held by speculators across the city. Tons of empty, blighted buildings held by speculators across the city. So the thesis of land value tax is if we increase the tax on speculators, on empty land, on empty buildings, we can then lower the tax on homeowners, lower the tax on occupied buildings, lower the tax on people who actually want to build things. Land value tax, okay? The challenge that we ran into is we were trying to make that the be-all and the end-all. Okay? It was the one policy we were going for, and as a result, the tax on land had to be so high to get the kind of targeted reduction we wanted on homeowners that, oh my God, you can't do that. That's way punitive. It's going to have all these unintended consequences. If you charge $8 trillion to anybody who owns empty land, the whole system's going to break down. Okay? So what I think, personally, we should do is we should make land value tax part of the solution We should have a suite of tools, a package of reforms, make it part of the solution, and then you don't have to tax the land so much that you run headlong into the argument of, that shit's crazy, it's too much, okay? That's my formal official statement on that matter. Okay, next, a local option excise tax. So I'm sure all of you wake up in the morning, have your coffee, and read the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. I certainly do. And they just put out a report because there's been a lot of focus on the idea of a local option sales tax, okay? So they offered these observations to start. This ain't no crazy idea. In fact, it's crazy not to have it. 37 states authorize their local jurisdiction to impose a local option sales tax, okay? They also have the observation that our sales tax is really low in Michigan, okay? I don't want to raise any tax, but if your structure is out of balance, where your property taxes are really high, and that's a bad tax because it distorts growth, prevents growth, and your sales tax is really low, and that's a better tax. Nobody loves taxes, but it's better, because if your latte is $6.06 versus $6, you're probably still going to buy it, correct? Especially if it's early in the morning and you're addicted to caffeine like me. So the Citizens Research Council's point was, we should be doing this. It's the right public policy, but there's some fundamental problems with a citywide local sales tax. Number one, you got to go and amend the Constitution of the state of Michigan. It's a really hard thing to do, okay? So big old undertaking. And then the second thing they point out is, yes, you're absolutely right. You know, sales tax is a better tax, but it does have regressive features, okay? In other words, regressive is, you know, any Detroiter goes and buys something, you know, they got to pay the tax. So it's, you know, it's not just on well-to-do folks. And then most importantly, it distorts consumer behavior. So I'm going to buy a car. The car's the kind of purchase where sales tax matters, okay? Not on your latte, but on a car. Shit, man, I'm going to go across the border to, you know, Oakland County and buy a car. If I don't got to pay a sales tax, I got to pay in Detroit. So they said, this is, everybody does this. It's a smarter thing to do, but here's the challenges with it. And my proposition is, okay, let's not do that whole kit and caboodle thing that has those negative consequences. Let's do a local option excise tax. Just do it on the economic core of the city, the greater downtown, okay? An excise tax does not require a constitutional amendment. Pass a law, you got an excise tax. And by the way, for everything I'm talking about, the money that's raised goes right into some account, lowers property taxes, okay? This is about having a smarter structure, a more efficient structure, a pro-growth structure, okay? It avoids the concerns about distorting behavior. We don't got a lot of car dealerships in the urban core, okay? We got a lot of coffee shops, restaurants. We don't have a lot of car dealerships, so you're not going to get that distortion of behavior, okay? And again, it follows a national best practice. Look across the country. Communities want to raise money from the visitor and tourist cores of their regions, okay? This is what cities across the country do. It's not regressive because most of the people are coming down here and spending money, myself included. You know, I could afford to spend another penny on my martini. If my martini is $16 versus $16.16 versus $16, I'm still going to have it. And I'm definitely going to have the next one. I'm going to care even less about the tax on the next one, okay? But no more than two, no more than two. You got to switch to an old-fashioned after that. And it's easily administrable. The way we could do it is say, just put it right on the sales tax base. Everybody's filing their sales tax return. Add a penny within this geography. Simple, done, okay? And it's still an excise tax because an excise tax versus a sales tax, which again gets us out of having to amend the Constitution, is it just has to be something specific about it. And if the geography is specific, boom, let's go. Final thing is tax abatement and reform, okay? And I know for a lot of you, you maybe aren't in this world, but every single development project in Detroit needs a tax abatement because they do not pencil at 82 mills. Can't make the numbers work, okay? What we have in our tax abatement structure in the city of Detroit right now is very significant abatements that are short-term. They're short-term, okay? So let's take the Commercial Redevelopment Act. Look around you, pretty much anything you see that's a new development probably has one of these, okay? It's the only way to do business. It takes the mill rate from 82 to 24. That's a very significant discount. But then in 10 years, you go off a cliff. You go off a cliff, and we have a looming cliff in our city with all these abatements burning off, okay? And it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue because as we've started to develop more and more, we're closer to the end of that 10-year period, and we have a giant cliff in our city, okay? It's generally not good public policy. It's a good movie in Thelma and Louise, but it's not good public policy to go off a cliff, okay? Audience is too young for Thelma and Louise. Come on, what's happening here? They go off a cliff, you know, they hold hands, it's a whole thing. Iconic. Gina Davis, the other girl. Okay, who was it? I can't remember who it was. Susan Sarandon. Okay, why else is this really bad, not the best public policy? Because it makes it really hard to finance projects. Think about it, okay? You have construction debt. For those of you who are not developers, that's when you're in the construction phase. And then once you're done and you're full and you're what we call stabilized, you go and get permanent financing, okay? That's development, okay? You typically stabilize after, 3 years. So you go and try to get permanent financing after 3 years, and the bank looks at you and says, I really can't lend you a whole lot of money because you're about to go off a cliff just in 7 short years. So I'm only going to give you a little bit of a loan. And that, again, gets us back to why we have structural problems with our development. And also distorts buying and selling. If you're a homeowner here with the tax abatement, are you making a decision to sell your house based on your family, based on where you want to live, based on your job, all that? No. I'm making a decision to sell my house based on, oh shit, my tax abatement's going to burn off. I got to sell my house, okay? It's distorting. So what do we think is something to think about? Make our tax abatements half as generous and twice as long. Half as generous and twice as long, okay? So what do you do? And I'll give you an example here. Instead of 24 mills that you pay under a PA 210 Commercial Rehabilitation Act, instead of paying 24 mills for 10 years, you pay 48 mills for 20 years, okay? Half as generous, twice as long. If you're the city of Detroit, what happens? I just made a bunch of money for the next 10 years. And if you think this is some esoteric thing, all of the new development in the city of Detroit has these abatements. We're talking about a lot of money for the city. Generates immediate revenue for the city. It makes development more financeable. You have a 20-year amortizing loan. Brilliant. You have a 20-year tax abatement now. You don't have a cliff when you're talking to the bank. For homeowners, they don't have a cliff as a family. And you can do the math. If you're a math person, you can do this in a way where you have similar present value. You're not hurting anybody, okay? Net present value. Pick the number where it's the same present value, okay? I'll give you an example on the right-hand side just to tell you. You have one project, medium-sized project, $10 million, okay? You do this reform, the city's making an additional $2.5 million from that project, okay? Over 10 years, all right? Now you multiply that by every single new development project we have in the city, and you're starting to talk about real money, okay? Real money that then can be used to lower property taxes and create this virtuous cycle of growth. And I think you could even take this one step further, 2 steps further, because there's a little footnote I want to read in a second too. I already have a tax abatement, okay? I got 5 years left on it. I'm looking at that cliff. Let me buy more years. Use the same formula, pay to extend it, and guess what happens? The city's getting immediate money. The math, we're not trying to give anybody a free lunch. The math can be the same. You just net present value it, okay? But I don't then have a cliff. I don't go off a cliff. Instead, I have a soft landing. And if I'm the city, instead of getting not much, I just made money for the next 5 years, okay? And all that money and all the other stuff we're talking about goes to lower property taxes. And here's a couple more beautiful things about this. If you look at that little footnote that's in the right-hand corner, We can structure this so, it's not up to, maybe they're going to take it and use it for something else. Structure it so it has to go to lowering property taxes. You can do it. We're creating the system. You can do it. And then here's the second thing. One of the structural issues we have in the city, and there's two sides of this, is that everything around you, all the taxes paid in this downtown area, a lot of them, go to the DDA, the Downtown Development Authority, okay? And that, honestly, in some ways is a very, very good thing because that's been instrumental in rebuilding the core of this city. But you know what? We need a thriving downtown and thriving neighborhoods. The 139 square mile city. So what you can do is for this new special tax that we have, by paying twice as much on the abatements, write the law so it doesn't go to the DDA. Put it right into the city's general fund. Put it right in the city's general fund, okay? And I'm telling you, it may sound inside baseball and technical, it means a lot of money into the city's general fund that can go to structurally reduce property taxes. So, final thoughts. Every mill levied in the city of Detroit generates $8 million. 1 mill is $8 million, okay? So, if these reforms can generate, let's just say, $65 million a year, and we got 3 different tools we talked about, right? We talked about the land value tax, we talked about a local option excise tax, we talked about abatement reform. I am pretty confident it could generate at least $65 million. We just lowered our millage rate by 8 mills. 8 mills. This is historic progress, okay? If they can generate $80 million, we can lower our millage rate by 10 mills. You know how big that is? Okay? That's a huge reduction in property taxes. And the point I want to end with, and I'm going to have to talk slow because I have 3 minutes and 17 seconds left, but I only have 3 bullets. Okay, I got to turn each of these bullets into a minute here. The key is good policy and forward progress, okay? The key, to go back to the beginning, is to have a suite of tools and to focus on independently, are these things the right, smarter thing to do, okay? And if each of these policies is independently a better approach for our community and a better approach for our economy, it's a win-win. It's a win-win. It's a win because it lowers property taxes. And if each policy is itself smarter, then it's a win in making our tax structure more efficient and more pro-growth. And make no mistake, this idea of having an overall structure that's more pro-growth, that's the ultimate answer for Detroit. Because the only way to truly, ultimately get us to a place where we're 40 mills, like you see in Grand Rapids, is to grow. So, I got 2 minutes and 12 seconds left. What should we do, guys? What do you want to do? Any questions? Any comments? I got a filibuster for 2 minutes. Should we just end it? We'll end it and let you get lunch early. Thank you all very much. Thank you for listening to me.